Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, so any of you were able to attempt the assignment and did you find any problem? If any of you have been able to attempt the problem, then maybe you can share the notebook with me and we will run through that. It was fairly a simple set of things to be done. None of you were able to attempt that. So yeah, I understand that all of these in first go you may not have been able to do, but again I will say that unless you attempt it, you will not get the practical aspect of it, and the coding or many of these things that we'll be doing in data science and machine learning going forward. Uh, these are the things which you will actually understand by doing. In the theory of knowledge, we say that there are two kinds of learnings. One is the intellectual learning, and the second is the experiential learning. So, in data science, especially the problem formulation, the solving the problem, it can be understood at the intellectual level only to some extent, but it requires the it is something which falls into the category of experiential learning. Unless you do it, some of these things will not really, sink in. It will not go inside. It will not remain in your memory. So I have given that example earlier also that you can see the videos of swimming or cycling from the best of the people in the world, and you can go on watching the videos for hours and hours how to swim. But until you try swimming, you will you are bound to drown because those things don't really sink in into your memory. That even after having seen hundreds of hours of the video, you will not be able to swim because it does require some practice. You will not be able to cycle because it does require some practice. Similarly, some of these concepts, how to apply that, the application part of it, you will require some practice. The theory part of it, you can remember it. But ultimately, your career change or the real benefit would come only if you're able to uh, work with the real example. And that's why I will urge that you find time, you try to solve the problems. Okay. So, what we'll do today is that maybe we can start with the assignment itself. So, some of the commands are already given. We download the data set, you don't have to do anything there. Okay, so the assignment starts as You have been given a diabetes data set performing the following operations on the diabetes. Perform the following operations on the diabetes data set. See what are the features, their count, and data types. So maybe you can use the chat window, and one of you could help me answer this, that what would be the most appropriate thing here, where we get the what are the features. Features means what are the column names, how many records I have, and what is the data type. Which command should I use here? Anyone can type in the chat window. I'll give you maybe four hints: head, tail, info, describe. Which one would be the most appropriate here? Anyone? Describe does not give you data type, isn't it? So it will give you the count, it will give you, it will show you all the names, but data type will not be there. So here, info would be the most appropriate one. If you just want the count, the data type, and the feature, because what happens in describe is that describe gives you the statistical measures, and therefore, if there are fields which are non-numerical, that will not even appear in the describe window. So describe actually ignores and it will not show you the non-numerical fields, and therefore info is the right thing here. Next we go here, see the basic statistical parameters of data like min, max, standard deviation. It is here that describe will be the most appropriate, because here it gives you the min, max, different percentiles, 25 percentile, 50 percentile, standard deviation, and count, and so on. Then histogram, you can refer to the earlier discussions and see that what command has to be given. It's actually a very simple command. I'll leave that out. Maybe you can try further. Now get the skewness and kurtosis measures. You know how to get that. Just as you give the skew command here, you have to give some command at this point, and you will get the kurtosis. Now after seeing that, you will have to assess that which one is very close to a normal distribution. So which one, how would you identify that something is normally distributed? By seeing the skewness value and the kurtosis value. What should be the skewness value and the kurtosis value if the data is fully normally distributed? It's a pure normal distribution, and what should be the value of kurtosis and skewness? Anyone can attempt. Would it be 1, -1, 0, or close to that? What is your recall from the discussion earlier? Just to recall, the skewness is how symmetrically the data is distributed around the mean. So if the mean is say 100, then if both data which are less than the mean and more than the mean, if they are distributed symmetrically, I mean, it's actually not just the mean, it's the mean, median, mode. You have to see, in the case of the normal distribution, the mean, median, mode all will be same. So if the kurtosis and skewness both are close to 0, then it is normally distributed. What will happen if the data set is skewed to the left? You remember some of the data set we had drawn where the more of the data was to the left of the peak and less of the data was towards the right of the peak. So if it is skewed to the left, the value would be negative, and if it is, and the value will go on increasing if the skewness is more and more. So a higher value of skewness will show that it is highly skewed, and if the value is negative, it means that if it is skewed to the left. If the value is positive, it is skewed to the right. Similarly, kurtosis would measure that whether my data has very sharp peaks or very fat tails. So the opposite of the sharp peak would be the fat tails. So if the peaks are very sharp, then the kurtosis value would be positive, and if the peaks are flat, the kurtosis value would be negative. And depending upon how flat or how peaked the data is, the value would be closer to, the value will go on increasing. And for normal distribution, it will be zero. So for both skewness and kurtosis, for a normal distribution, it will be zero. Okay. And if both of these are more than one, either more than less than -1 or more than one, then we say that the data is not normal. Okay. Then after that is the box plot that you would do, that I will leave it to you. So all these blanks, actually, if you refer to the other worksheet, you will find the answers, but you should keep trying from your notes or from your also you can seek help here. So for example, if you are wanting to find out that what to fill in here, the moment you put the bracket here, and if you are not getting the help by itself, press control space. So it will give you what can be filled in. Just one. So at any of the places, you can go and ask for help. So these are the things, these are the commands which you can put. So if we are putting here, even if you don't remember the full thing, if you remember that this is starting with say K, then it will filter out, and then you might be able to recall that, okay, this is kurtosis, okay, or actually the command is kurt. So this is kurt, and then this is a function, so you have to give these two brackets, and then it will run. Okay, so you get the kurtosis value for each of these features which we have in the diabetes data set. Okay, now similarly here we come to the pair plot, and three things that I am asking you to define. The first one, you have to okay, so here aspect is defined, height is defined. Now data, so you can choose here as data equal to, and then give the file name. So if I give data equal to, and what's my file name here? Data.diabetes. Then I come here and paste it, and then it will do the should do the pair plot. X is not important. Okay, so we have to give the height and aspect ratio also. So suppose I give the height as 5 and the aspect ratio is 1, and then you should be able to run that. So that is the process that you should follow. If you have a guess here, go and type out. The system will help you. I mean, the system will give you the help anyway, and from there you can choose. even if you get the first one wrong and the value is not coming what you want, try the other one. So some of these things you don't really have to remember all the time the exact command, but the basic ones, of course, you should be knowing. So you've got the pair plot. So this is the kind of thing I am expecting you to do the exercise. And also, suppose if you have got it here, just try to understand what each of these plots are telling us. Is there a difference between one plot or the other? What is the kind of first intuitive explanation that we can make? And if you have any question, then just note down and we will proceed with that. Okay, so these things are very simple. I would again urge you that you spend some time in trying to solve it. Otherwise, some of these concepts you will start finding a bit difficult to understand as you go now. Okay, so that was the assignment. Now we will proceed with our okay. So yesterday, until now, as a part of data preparation, we have seen we were working with a few concepts in data wrangling. Encoding we had done, and encoding again, just to recall that if the data set is given in the form of certain categories, and those categories we need to do the transformation into the numerical numbers. And there are two types of categorical data, and just to distinguish what is categorical, categorical is the data which can take defined number of values. Those values could be maybe running into hundreds and thousands, but it is still defined. So for example, how many types of trees are there? Those number would be running into thousands. There are thousands of varieties of plants and trees, but still it's not something which can be infinite. And therefore, that will still be called a categorical data. Whereas other things which can take infinite number of values, for example, what is the temperature? Temperature could be 37.8 degrees, 37.82 degrees, any value it can take, and therefore theoretically it can take infinite number of values. So those values are called the continuous values. So the numeric values that we have, it can be continuous or it can be categorical. The string values that we will have, that will be categorical. Now, to be able to process the data in the algorithms that we have, we will convert the categorical data into numerical. And before we do that, we need to make an assessment that whether this categorical data is ordinal or nominal. So ordinal and nominal, the clues are hidden in the name itself. That is, nominal means that it is just the names, and the ordinal means that there is an order there. So if it is, say, rating of the product, and those are given as a excellent and very good, good, average, and so on, there is an order there, and therefore we can use just the label encoding, because when the labels are assigned by the system, then it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then those numerics we can treat that as an order. Because from the system perspective, when we give the numbers, the system would treat 5 as a higher number than 4. But if that relationship is not there, where 5 is higher than the 4, or where the underlying category, there is no hierarchy like we saw in the housing data set, that if it is, say, near bay or island or things like that, then we what is called as the one-hot encoding. It means that we are not creating any hierarchy. In one-hot encoding, whatever is the number of categories that we have, so each category will become a column by itself, and depending upon which row has which value. So if it is near bay, the nearby value will become 1, and every other column, every other corresponding column like ocean or inland, that will become 0. So we are keeping one of these values as hot. So 0 denotes cold and 1 denotes hot, and that's why it's called one hot encoding. It means that out of all the categories, only one category will be the hot category. So that part we have seen. Now, all of these are the things which qualify to be remembered or recalled for a data scientist. So you should be able to answer it immediately, that what is one hot encoding, what is label encoding. After having done this, then we were saying that one of the other problems that you will have is our data set will be very diverse in nature. Different data elements will be of different orders. And we had seen that in our housing data set also, that the median housing price that was given in terms of hundreds of thousands was 400,000 or 500,000 or 200,000, whereas many other data elements are only in a single digits. For example, the income data, the median income which has been given is only in the single digit. Now again, there is a problem if we treat it, if we feed the data like that only, then again from the system perspective, because they are the numbers, if the numbers are higher, the system tends to, or all the algorithms, they tend to give a higher value to the data which have now higher in order. It means that if the median income is only say 3, 4, 5, and if the median house price is into hundreds of thousands, in the algorithms, in many of the algorithms, it will try to assign a higher value to the median housing price. And therefore, we need to bring all the data to a common scale. And that process is called scaling. That is what we will attempt today. Create function not required to say. So we'll read the file first. So in Python, as you close the notebook, it releases everything from the memory. So every time you open or every time you are disconnected, you need to run these commands once again. So we have read the file, understanding the file, analysis, not required. We'll come to data merging and wrangling. So here encoding, label encoding we have seen, one hot encoding we discussed, handling missing data that we discussed. What are the three ways that we can handle the missing data? Either I can remove the rows which have a missing data, I can remove the columns which have a missing data, or I can replace the missing data with certain values. And in our case, we chose to replace that with the median, because median is the data, as we have seen earlier, is the least influenced by the outliers. So last time we had taken the median and we replaced the missing data with the median. What are the syntax for missing, filling the not available data? It's simply fill NA. And then we say fill NA. Within the bracket, we say fill with what? Okay. If we have to drop the columns, then we use drop NA. It means drop that data which is not available. Or if you want to drop the column, then it is the file name dot drop, and then within that you will give the columns which you need to drop. So all the syntaxes are very intuitive. That's why Python is actually very easy to work with. But still it does require the practice. That cannot be done away with. Then we also talked about feature engineering, where we are saying that, okay, I have got certain features in the data set. Can we enhance these features to get a better result? So my data set may not be perfect, and that is the reason why there is a data science unit required, because all the data you will receive will not be in the proper format, will not be in the proper shape, it will not be um, appropriate for deriving the conclusions that we want. So we saw that the data given to us was aggregate for a district or a locality. But what I am supposed to project is the pricing of a given house. And therefore, we thought that it will be better if we convert the data for an individual house. So, for example, if I have bedrooms, those bedrooms are showing in my original data set as how many bedrooms are there in a given locality. But what I need to find out is that how many bedrooms are there in a given house, not in a given locality. And how do I find that? So I can find out at least the average of that by dividing the total number of houses in the locality, total number of bedrooms in the locality by total number of houses in the locality, and then my data will become, and bedrooms on an average how many bedrooms are there in the houses in that given locality. So that's what the feature engineering we did. We found out new features, or we extracted new features, and we removed or we dropped some of the features which we didn't want to continue with, like total bedrooms, total rooms, population, and so on. So that was the feature engineering. So feature engineering can be done manually by observation of data, and here you need to interact with the domain experts in your unit to understand that am I dropping something which could be very important. Similarly, we discussed that we can drop some of these data which are highly correlated. So by seeing the correlation data, we can drop a few of them, because if you have data elements which have a very high correlation among themselves, so for example, total bedrooms and total rooms both have a very high correlation, then one of these should actually be dropped. Today, we'll discuss the scaling part. That is, suppose I have a data. So first we'll simply see with a small data set that what a scaling is all about, and then we will apply the same principle on the housing data set that we have. So I'm creating a small data frame which will have three. So if I put three different list here, the first list is comprised of 4122, second list is 1393, and the third one is 5751. If I create a data frame like this, each of these rows, as we have seen earlier in our backpack problem, will become a row in the So you see, each of these has become a row. I've converted this into a data frame. We have not given the column name, so it takes the default index as 0, 1, 2, 3. So now X has become a data frame. So what we will do is that rather than keeping it just the single digits, some of these are say into 100. This data set is in say hundreds, and this data set is suppose in 10,000, so 50,000, 70,000. Suppose my data set is like this. Okay. Now we see that for a given feature, so your features are 0, 1, 2, 3. These are my features. The data which I have is actually I should be doing the other way around. So because what I want to see is that the data which I have been given for different features, they are of different orders. So I will change this here. So second one is carrying 62,000. how the data set, suppose I have, where the first column is having data in the single digit, the second column is in hundreds, third column is in thousands, and the fourth one is multiples of 10,000. Now the problem here is that if I am using this for certain prediction or certain analytics, then these all the features are having data of completely different order. One is in single digit, some in hundreds, some in tens of thousands, and therefore some of the algorithms like regression, they will start giving a higher weight to my column 3 or the feature 3, and the actual output might be distorted. And therefore, what we do is that we try to bring this onto the same scale. Now, one of the scaling, so for example, we will see what are the different types of scaling available. Let's discuss that first, and then we'll come back here. So when we are doing the scaling, there are 4 types of scaling that you would be using more frequently. I mean, only 3 of them more frequently. The fourth one is more for understanding. Yeah. The first one is called the min-max scaling. It means that bring everything between 0 and 1. The lowest value will be 0 and the highest value will be 1, irrespective of what these values are. So if we go back to our example here, so you see here, each column I will bring them into, between 0 and 1. So let me run this program. I'll explain how we are going about, and then, but first see the results. Okay, just do the import first. I think the imports have not been done for this one, so let me do the import here. So these scalings are available in a library called sklearn. So import these libraries, then it should work. Yeah. So we'll go one by one, and then we'll see the results. So first we'll do the min-max scaler. Now you see, after I call the min-max scaler, how do we call that? I will come to that in a minute, but just see the results. The first column was 415. Now that has been converted into 0.75, 0, and 1. So as I mentioned, that the min-max scaling brings everything between 0 and 1. The lowest one will become 0, and the highest value will become 1 in all cases. So the formula for that is that min-max scaling. How do we derive that? That is value minus the minimum. If you see this part here, the value minus minimum, divide that by max minus min. So if the value itself is the maximum, then it will become max minus min divided by max minus min, which is the same number, so it will become 1. So the maximum value will always become 1. Suppose it is min, then the formula will become min minus min, which will be 0. So 0 by any number will become 0. And any other number in between will have some value between 0 and 1. So that's how, when we do this scaling, you see everything has been converted between 0 and 1. So how this 4 became 0.75. So we have the value, which is the 4 minus min, which is 1. So 4 minus 1 is 3, divided by max minus min. So max is 5, min is 1. So that becomes 4. So 3 by 4 is 0.75. So it will convert all the numbers and it will bring between 0 and 1. So it does not matter what is the scale or what is the order of the number. So even if they are between 100 and 700 or between 20,000 and 1 lakh, everything has been converted between 0 and 1. The max will be 1. In all these columns, you will see that there would be a 0, there would be a 1, and then every other number will be in between. So we have just reduced, so we have brought everything onto a same scale, and that scale is 0 and 1. Okay. That is called the min-max scaling, where everything will be brought into between 0 and 1. Now, if you see here, we are not really losing the data, because 20,000 and 10,000, there is some proportion of the data, and that proportionality has been retained. So min-max scaling is one way to scale the data. The other way to scale is based on the standard deviation. So it actually brings the z-score, converts every data element to its z-score. Now the z-score, as we have seen earlier, z-score is you are converting everything in, or you are seeing everything in terms of the standard deviation. Z-score we had discussed here. And if you remember what was z-score, so if you recall, we had discussed this. So we found the standard deviation, and then we are taking the distance of a given data point from the mean. So we have computed the mean, we have computed the standard deviation. Now for each data element, we will see what is the value, that is the value of the data element minus the mean, and divide that by standard deviation. So z-score is nothing but you are measuring the distance between the mean and the data point in terms of standard deviation. And what was the standard deviation? Standard deviation is the sort of an average distance which the data elements have from the mean. And how do we find that? We take the simple difference between the data element and the average. We square that so that the plus and minus don't cancel out. Then we take a sum, then we divide that by n or n minus 1, which is the number of observations we have in the population or in the sample. And since we had squared that, we take a square root of that. That becomes the standard deviation. So the second method of scaling is called the standard scaling, or the standard here represents that this is scaling things in terms of standard deviation. So, what the formula here would be? So, So in this case, when we are doing the standard scaling, what we do is the formula is this one, this value minus mean, and divide that by standard deviation. So that's the z-score formula that we have seen. So it will bring the z-score of each and every number. Now, here there is no defined range as such that for example, in the min-max scaling, everything will be between 0 and 1. In the standard scaling, there is no defined range. But as we have seen by the definition of the normal distribution, that about 68% of the data is between plus and minus 1 standard deviation from the mean. And therefore, if the data is normally distributed, you will see that 68% of your records, or 68% of your observation, after we have done the standard scaling, will have the value between plus 1 and minus 1. 90% of the data should be between plus 2 and minus 2. So there is no end limit to it, but majority of the data, about 90 to 99, about 90% of the data will have a value of between minus 2 and plus 2. About 99% of the data will have the value of between plus 3 and minus 3, and so on. Very few will go into higher number. All of you being in IT company would have heard the concept of the Six Sigma. So many of the IT companies are trying to achieve the Six Sigma. So sigma is representation of the standard deviation, and it means that 6 sigma means 6 sigma away from the mean. If you say 1 sigma away from the mean, it is 68% of the data elements is inside that range, and only 32% is outside that. When you do 6 sigma, so if you say plus minus 6 sigma, now that is 1 in a million. And that is what the meaning of the 6 sigma is, that you are trying to achieve accuracy, and your errors will actually be only outside the 6 sigma range. So the area covered by the 6 sigma plus minus 6 sigma would be 99.9999, so up to 5 digits. So we'll do the standard scaling now. So for doing the standard scaling, we call the standard scaler. Now let's understand this, what we are doing in this one. So I have created a function. Now the functions start with def. When Python sees that a syntax is starting with def, it knows that now it is expecting a function. It is defining a function. Then we give the function name. I've given the name as getScaled. This is the name you can choose. It can be ABC, it can be XYZ. Then we define the parameters which this would be taking. So I'm defining 2 parameters. One is that which is the scalar, because we have 4 different types of scalar. I will pass which scalar I want to use as a parameter, and then on which data frame I need to apply that scalar. So that's my, and then we give a colon, and that's where the definition of the function ends. After that, we define what is called as the body of the function. So the body of the function, now we define what are the operations that we want the function to do. So the first operation I am doing is that store the column names. So whatever is we had also talked about the concept of the binding of the parameters. These are the actual parameters which I would be passing, and these are the nominal parameters. So when I call the get scaled function with these two variables or these two parameters, it will go and bind with the parameters which is defined as a part of the method. So min max scalar, whatever value I'm giving here, min max scalar, that will be assigned to scalar and the x will be assigned to pf. Okay. So inside the function, I can use these names. So I say columns is equal to df dot columns. Why? So first I am storing the column names to some variable, and this is because when we call the scalar function, then it actually returns an array, not a data frame. So when it returns an array, I lose the column names, and therefore I will replace the column names once again, and that's why I'm storing the column names here. So if you see the different parts of the command here, what we are giving the scaling command is this part. Rest is that whatever output I am getting, put that into a data frame. That's a different syntax. So now the scalar is the min-max scalar. Then we say we call that a scalar. So we call that a scalar and we invoke the fit transform function. And that fit transform function, I supply or I give the parameter as the data frame which has come to me. It can be a data frame, it can be an array. Okay, so only this part is the command for scaling. Rest of the command that you are seeing here is for converting whatever is the output that I receive from the scaling into a data frame. So I could have written the same thing like this. So to start with, you should start like this, especially those who are the beginners here. So I will give some name here. So I will call the scalar, the fit transform function on the scalar, and this scalar is now min-max scalar. If I'm calling that with min-max scalar, the value of this will be min-max scalar. If I'm calling that with the standard scalar, the value of this scalar will become standard scalar. So it says that of the standard scalar, call the fit transform function, and for all the scalars, you only call the same function, and that's where the fit transform function would be there. And fit transform function expects that what is that I am going to, fit and transform. So this fit transform you will come across very often. What it does is that it is actually a combination of two different methods, and these two methods or functions can be called separately also. The first one is called fit. So the fit only computes the parameters, and the transform will actually replace those parameters inside the arrays. So what it returns is an array. What it returns is not really a data frame, and therefore I'll put this into a data frame. So rather than putting this, I can say here df scaled. And while creating the data frame, I am taking this array, which will be the output of the scaling function, and I give back the column names here. And then this x scaled is now a data frame which is I return. So the output of this will be a data frame. That is what we are seeing here. Okay. Now let's run this. You get the same result. Now, as we have seen, that in Python you have this chaining rule. So either we can do it step by step or df scaled. Anyway, so whatever we are putting here is the value. So I can put this command directly here. Rather than putting this in two steps, I will be able to perform a function in a single step. But as we have discussed earlier, that the more important thing is that it should be readable. So for you, if the two step is more readable, you should write the code in two steps. If one step is equally readable for you, then you should put that in a single step, but it will perform the same function. So that's what we are doing here is scaling. The operational part is actually very simple. We'll call the scalar, we'll call the fit transform function, and we'll give the data frame or the array as the parameter. What it returns is an array. That's what we are getting here. So min-max scalar, we have seen that it will scale it from between 0 and 1. Every number will be brought into 0 and 1. And therefore now if you see that earlier in my original data, it was at a very different scale. Each feature or each column was at a very different scale. Now I have been able to convert them into some common scale, which is in the case of the min-max scalar, it is between 0 and 1. Now let's do the scaling on with the standard scalar. And now you see that a few numbers are negative, a few numbers are positive, and there is no defined end to it because the Z values or the Z score of the data in some cases would be negative. That is, if it is less than the mean, the number would be negative because the formula would be value minus mean, divide that by standard deviation. So if the value is less than mean, the Z score would become negative. If the value is higher than the mean, then it will be positive. So higher the number here, it means that it is farther from the average data. It is farther from the mean. It is farther from the average of this particular feature. If it is negative, it means that it is less than the average. If it is positive, it means that it is more than the average. Let's compare this with our original data here. So here if you see 514, the average is 3.3. Then 5 plus 1, 6, 6 plus 4, 10, divided that 10 by 3. So the average is 3.3, and therefore 1 is less than the average. So 1 would have a negative Z score, and 4 and 5 both will have a positive Z score. That is what you are seeing here. 4 and 5 are having a positive value here, and 1 is having a negative value. So by seeing these Z score numbers, you should be able to make a guess that which ones are actually less than average, which ones are more than average, which ones are close to average, and which ones are farther from the average. So lower the value, closer are they to the average, and higher the value, farther away from the average they are. So this is how we will do the standard scaling. We are bringing the data back to the some common scale, and in this case, the common scale is the Z score. There is another scaling which is called the robust scaling. Now that takes care of removing the impact of outliers. As we have seen that mean is impacted by the computation of the mean or the computation of the standard deviation, that would be impacted by the outliers. So we are seeing in the example that if I have data say ranging between 1 and 15 and there is one data element which is 100, then it skews my computation of the mean. If that 100 was not there, my average may have been say around 10. Now that 100 is there, my average jumps to 16 or 17. That example we had seen earlier here. The average here, we are finding the average here. This is the data set. If I put here as 1000, you will see that just because of one data element, the average actually gone to 1000, whereas everything else is between 36. So if there is some outlier like this, then my average, and not just the average, but even the standard deviation would be highly impacted. So if you see here, if I have just one number here, earlier the standard deviation is 13.49, the average is 35.7. I just bring in one high number and the standard deviation becomes very high, 31,000, and average also becomes very high. So some of these measures get very highly influenced by the outliers. So that 1 lakh number that we gave, that was an outlier, and the outlier impacts the mean and the standard deviation. And therefore, there is another way to handle it, and that is called robust scaling, which takes care of the outliers in a much better way than standard scaling or min-max scaling. And what does it do? It will not take the mean, it will take the median. So in the computation, it takes the median. And as we have seen that it is not, the median does not get influenced by the outliers, even in the earlier example here. If I compute, say, if I compute here the median, so median value here is 40. Even if I change this to 100,000, you will see that the average will change, the standard deviation will change, but the median will not change. Median has changed to 43. Median should not change. Okay. Yeah. So the earlier value was 40. Now it becomes 43. So there is hardly any impact on the median, and therefore in the robust scaling, what we do is we take the value minus the median and then define that by IQR. Now the concept of IQR is known to you. It is the interquartile range, the difference between the value at the 75 percentile minus the value at the 25 percentile. So this is another way of doing the scaling where we don't take the mean, because if you want to avoid the impact of the outliers, then we should go for the, or if my data set is having a good number of outliers, then I should rather use robust scaling compared to the standard and the min-max scaling. These are the three different ways of doing the computation or bringing everything into a common scale. So let's try out the third one. So here also the process remains the same. I just changed the name of the scalar, rest of the command remains the same. And here you see. So you will also see that the values that I get when I use the min-max scalar, when I use the standard scalar or the robust scalar, these values will be different from each other. So here I have, say for column 3, I have the value as 0, 0.125 and 1. Here it is minus 0.84, 0.56 and 1.4. This is 0.25, 1 and 1.75. So the values would be different, but these are different ways to bring the data onto a common scale without losing the relationship of one element with the other. So whatever data we have for observation 1, record 1, observation 2, if you see, the relationship between different data elements have not been lost, but they have been brought to a common scale. And this common scale, the range of that scale would also be different. In case of min-max, it will be between 0 and 1. In case of the standard scaling and robust scaling, there is no defined range that this would be between 0 and 1, but they are still brought onto a common scale. Z values will normally be between plus minus 3. Similarly, the robust scaling values will also be in the range of plus minus 3 or plus minus 4. So that's what we do the scaling. Now there is another kind of scaling which is called the normalization or normalizer. By using that, we don't go by columns. So if you want to scale the columns, then we use either of the three which we discussed. In some cases, you may want to scale the rows. For example, if I have the data of the share price movement for last 5 years, so one row represents the data of, say, Reliance. The second one is the share prices of say Infosys. The third one is the share price for TCS. So all of these relate to one entity, and therefore we may like to do the scaling across the rows. So if you want to do the scaling across the rows, then we use the normalizer, and there are two ways to normalize that. One is called the L1, and the second one is called L2. We'll go into some of these things later on, but and I will not touch that because that may confuse you right now that why we are doing the normalizer. But just understand that we can do the scaling across the column, which is in pandas or in Python will be called as the axis one. So we can do the scaling across axis 1, and we can do the scaling across axis 0, or we can do the scaling across column, or we can do the scaling across the rows. What will be more important for us in most of the cases is the scaling across the features or scaling across the column. And for that, the three main things to use is the minimax scaler, standard scaler, and the robust scaler. Now, again, coming back to the question that why do we do this scaling at all, is because all these are numbers, and therefore, in many of the algorithms that we will use, the higher numbers tend to be given higher weightage, but that's not what the intent is, because I would like to treat each of these features in the same fashion, and therefore the scaling is required. And there are three ways of scaling: min-max, standard, and robust scaling. Is it clear so far why we are doing scaling, and what are the different ways to do scaling? Okay. So coming back to the life cycle of the data preparation. So as you would be seeing that until now, we are just working with the data which we have got, and as I mentioned earlier, that itself will normally take about 50 to 60% of your time in a real project. And in all the computer algorithms, the data preparation becomes very important, because all of you have heard about the garbage in and garbage out. So if my data is not very good, then my result would not be good. And therefore, the data has to be prepared, or the data has to be engineered in a very meticulous fashion. So the different steps, we are going all step by step. So we have seen what are the things that we do. We first get the data, we understand the data from different perspective. After that, we do the analysis from, we see the descriptive statistics, what is the central tendency, what is the dispersion, and what is the shape of the distribution, and the correlations. And we can also figure out if there are any outliers. Then a few things that we have not discussed yet was, apart from doing the statistical analysis, we also need to do some qualitative analysis. And these are, for example, is the data, the size of the data which we have got, is that sufficient? So for example, for the housing price prediction, I had got data for about 20,600 past transactions that were recorded. That looks like a fairly large data. But suppose I was given the data of only 5 houses. Now, based on the price of 5 houses, can I make the prediction for future? So I have the data at which 5 houses were sold in the past. Now, based on that, making a prediction for houses in different localities, for different types of houses, we know that it's actually very small data. So we also need to see that for a given purpose, whether the data is sufficient or not. And one of the simple parameter to check is that whatever is the number of features. So for example, in our housing data set, we had 10 different features. So the number of observations cannot be less than 10. It has to be more than 10. So as long as your number of records is a multiple of the number of features. So if my number of features is 10, then the bare minimum that I would say I should be having is 3 to 5 times of that. It means that 30 to 50 records is the bare minimum. It will not give you a good result, but that is the bare minimum that you should have. So that's the thumb rule of checking sufficiency. Then whether the data is actually representative or not. So for example, in the housing data set, representation would be, because the housing prices actually vary depending upon the locality, depending upon how large the houses are, what are the type of the houses, whether they are flats or bungalows, or at which location they are. So the locations which are close to the city center, they would be costlier. In this case, locations which are in the Bay Area, that might be costlier. So whether the data I have got is the representative set of the entire population. Then whether the data I have got is recent enough, and this recency will also be depending upon the context that we are dealing in. So for example, housing price data, even if it is say 2 years or 3 years old, it would be a fair indication of the prices, unless there has been a substantial change in the prices of late. But in some cases, for example, if you're dealing with the human genome or the human genes data, recency is not really that important, because the human genetics is not really changing that fast. It only changes, with some mutation over thousands of years. Otherwise, the human genes remain the same. So depending upon what kind of area or function that we are dealing with, recency is very important. So if you are working on data of weather, then to be able to predict, I need to have the data which is as recent as a few minutes back, as recent as a few hours back, to be able to make the prediction. So the training can be done on the old data also, but for making a prediction, I need to have very recent data. So recency is one of the things that we need to check and confirm. Other part is the compliance, which is becoming more and more important today. That am I using some data which I am not supposed to use? So for example, many of the personal data now, we have a very strict regulation, especially in Europe, that if you are maintaining the personal data of an individual, then whether I am supposed to make some prediction based on that data or not, or am I taking the correct sample which complies with the local regulation? Does it comply with the privacy rules? So these are also some of the consideration that you will have to take. And of course, there would be other specialists in your team, especially the people from the legal department and all that, who will help you out. But you must raise the question that whether the data I'm using is compliant with the local regulations or not, is compliant with the ethical norms or not. So these are the four things, which is the qualitative analysis, whether my data is sufficient, whether it represents it is the right representation of the population or the type of analysis which I am going to do. Is it recent enough in the given context, and is it compliant with the ethical norms and compliant with the legal norms of the organization? Okay. Then we came to the actual data wrangling. We did the encoding. We have now done scaling. So now we did the scaling on a small data set just for the purpose of demonstration and understanding. Now we will apply this scaling onto our housing data. Okay. So here we are putting it through the same function. Only thing is that earlier I passed the parameter as the data frame X. Now I'll pass the data frame housing 1. Housing 1, what I have done is that now this scaling you cannot do on the categorical data. So the ocean proximity was having data which is string data. So the scaling cannot be done on the string data. So you have to remove that, and then you can do the scaling. So that's why I'm using housing 1, which does not contain ocean proximity. So let me run all the commands earlier so that this housing one gets created. So you can use run before, so it will run all the cells prior to this one. I think it is not running because there is an error here in the reading file. Just all this out. Just once again, I'm trying to ensure that I have the housing one as in the right shape. Showing that housing one is not defined because so we are defining here. Because we are running in the sequence, some cells have not run. We'll not worry about that anymore. We'll just. So if you see, it is not running because the ocean proximity, which is a scalar, which is a string field. So we'll just create a housing one here. So I'll just drop. If you get this kind of problem, we'll just see that what is the problem here. So it has, I'll ask for housing.info, then it will show me all the fields and data types. Okay, so I have got all the float numbers only in housing, so I don't have to actually worry about when we do scaling. Okay. So here I can just change it to housing itself. It has done the scaling. So it is getting other cells we may have done some filtering. Okay, so I have the housing data. Now, that housing data I have not made any change here. This is the depth of scale. Yeah. So now I am trying to scale housing and I'm expecting a problem where it is saying that could not convert a string to float. It has got a data called nearby, and that is because the data set which I am using now, let's say, what does this housing data frame that I am trying to use? So if I see the info of the data frame which I am trying to use, there is one data element which is an object. This is not numeric, this is the ocean proximity, and that's why it is saying that we cannot scale it. Obviously, you can't scale it if the data is not numeric. So we need to remove this data field, this column, before we do the scaling. And how do we remove that? So we create another data set, say housing 1, and then say that is equal to housing.drop, and then we define the list of the columns which we are going to drop. So the list will always be defined inside the bracket, and that's why after giving the parenthesis, so this parenthesis here means that we are calling a function. So any function that you call has to start with a parenthesis. So we are calling a drop function, and that's why it starts with parenthesis. Now the data that we need to provide is a list, and that's why it starts with a bracket. So we are providing a list as an input, and that list has one data item, which is proximity, and I can give comma something else, and that becomes the list. And then I will do the scaling on this housing 1, and I'm storing that to just to keep the identity separate and giving a new name, that this will be a new data frame with the name housing minmax. So ocean, did I make some mistake? Ocean proximity. So housing dot drop ocean proximity. It is saying that ocean proximity not found. Okay. So I need to define the axis. If you don't give the axis, then it actually looks for dropping the data from the rows. So I need to define here as axis is equal to 1. It means that drop the column. So if I give the axis is equal to 1, it will look for this data in the columns. If I don't give, the default value is axis is equal to 0. So it will look for that value in the index or in the rows. So now it should work. Yeah. So we have dropped the ocean proximity, and then my scaling works. Okay. So now, as we have seen that the scaling was done on this small data set that we had taken earlier, similarly, the scaling is done in the same speed or the same, so fast. And now you see that all the latitude, longitude, housing price, everything has been brought between 0 and 1. And how do I know that everything has been brought between 0 and 1? If I call the describe function here, I will take that into another cell, otherwise it will run again. So now I have the total 20,640 records. Total bedroom was having only 433 records that we saw earlier. Now if you see, the max for everything is 1. Max for all columns is 1, and min for all columns is 0, because we have done the min max scaling. So everything has been brought between 0 and 1. Now if we run the standard scaler, then if you see, the max is varying for all the fields, and in some cases the max is going to 16, 14. It means that they are real outliers, because when you see the Z score going beyond 3 itself shows that it is very far from the mean. So any value which is beyond 3, that's actually a real outlier when you are doing this Z score. Now that you would not be able to figure out by just seeing the original numbers, because you don't know that how far from the mean they are, because what is the distribution that you don't come to see. But here I know for sure that there are some data fields in total bedrooms which are far away from the average. There are some same cases with the total bedrooms, population, household. Other things are more or less good, but there are certain data elements in household, population, bedrooms which are far, are the real outliers. Now we can also do the scaling with the robust scaler here. The process, as you see, that once you get some simple grasp of the syntax of pandas and Python, getting things done is actually very simple. So if I run here, now the things have got scaled as per the robust scaler, which is using the median. So the value minus median, divide that by IQR, is the robust scaler. Now here also we see that total bedrooms, some values are actually very high. So now by all this, we know that there are certain data elements, especially in total rooms, total bedrooms, and households, which are the complete outliers. Now we could also do the same thing after feature engineering, that is after converting the total bedrooms and total rooms into rooms per house and bedroom per house. We could do this scaling after that, and then also we can see that whether there is outliers or not. Okay, so here we have done the feature engineering where so now I have the bedrooms per house and rooms per house after we do the feature engineering, and the data is now contained in housing 1. So now if we come and run this scaling here, so min-max scaling, I don't need to drop anymore. So we did this scaling, then now we'll see describe. So now we have got min-max, anyway, everything will be between 0 and 1. Now, if we do the standard scaling, so now I am running on a data set which has the bedrooms per house and rooms per house. We wanted to see that whether here also we have outliers. Actually, the bedrooms per house, the standard deviation goes to 69. So obviously there is something wrong. There is some data which is carrying out, a large number of bedroom. So possibly we should remove those things from the uh, data set, because that will pollute or contaminate my predictions. Similarly, there are some data elements, especially in the number of households, which are very high. Okay, so now we are able to identify that there are certain records which I need to remove. Now, to find out how many records are of that nature, now having seen that, having done the scaling, then we see that there are certain outliers. Now we can find out which are those outliers. So we can find out first by saying, say, so here, if you see this cell, here we can say that here we can filter out. So for example, the last scaling we have done, so in housing min max, so in this one we are saying that say the households is having a max value 17.46, which looks very high to us. So this one is households. So we'll see that how many houses are there which is having a value of more than say 5, because we feel that after robust scaling, any value more than 5 is actually very high. So what are we doing here? We are saying that take the housing min-max data frame, take the household column of that, and show me which ones are having a value more than 5. Filter out those things from the housing min-max and store that to another variable or another data frame df. Okay. And then we'll see the shape of df. So we'll come to know the number of records. So you see there are 195 records which after scaling is having a value of more than 5. So out of 20,000 records, I can afford to drop them. Similarly, if I want to see that how many records are having, say, bedrooms per house is having some very absurd number. So we'll say here bedrooms per house. Here also after scaling, whatever is more than 5. So here we have 475 records which are outliers. So until now we have identified the outliers. Now we can remove the outliers. And removing the outliers, we can go in the same fashion as we have used earlier. We can drop those records which are having more than a given value. So either we can do the dropping of some of these things manually, one by one, or there are certain methods also available where the dropping of the records, which is outlier, can be done. So after we have done this, then my data set is actually ready for doing the algorithmic processing. So let's go back to the kind of activities we wanted to do on our data set. So we have done the encoding, we have done the scaling, we have seen how to identify the outliers, then we will remove the outliers. Correlation part we have seen after having identified which features are highly correlated between each other, we can remove them manually, or there is an automatic way of identifying that, which is called the variation inflation factor. I will show you that one. So after that, my the common checks that we do is now complete. So having seen the correlation, now we will see certain other methods where I don't have to manually identify or do these operations. There are certain uh, features which are meant to reduce the dimensionality. We will talk about that in the next session. So after having done the previous functions like say scaling or identification of the outlier or finding the correlation, finding the missing data and handling that, now we come to what is called the feature extraction. It means that using certain techniques can we reduce the number of features without losing data. So that we will do in the session tomorrow. Any questions for today? So we'll add a few things to the assignment notebook today, or maybe I'll share with you another notebook by name assignment 2. But make sure that you are solving these things and submitting to me. Otherwise, I would not be able to assess that how much progress you are making. Why I'm saying is that I want, if you are finding difficulty, this is one of the ways for me to know that you are facing difficulty in some areas. And then I would like to have a one-on-one session with some of you. If there is a common problem, then maybe some 2 of you or 3 of you. But those problems we cannot afford to leave like that, because as we go into more and more, advanced topics starting now, because right until now we have been doing the data preparation part. Now is the actual fun, that after I have all the data, then we will do some wonderful things with that data. So the actual exciting things to start now, that we will be able to actually predict the prices. Will be then going into some of the other aspects of the machine learning, like natural language processing. So some of these things, as I had explained in one of the sessions, that which are the type of the projects we are going to do. Those things are very exciting, but as I mentioned, that we will not be able to do justice to them until my data is not appropriate. So data preparation part is very important. In all the data sets that we will be dealing with, not everything that we have discussed till now has to be done. But in some beta cases, you will have to handle the outliers. In some cases, you will find a very high correlation. In some cases, there would be some missing data. In some other cases, the data would be complete. So we don't have to really do the removal of the null data and so on. But still, data preparation will be very important. So even if you have not done till now, you must earmark about half an hour outside this session to be able to work on the assignments. Okay, then you will really enjoy the journey that we have ahead of us, starting maybe 2 or 3 days from now. So by tomorrow or day after, we'll complete the data preparation part, and then we'll start going into the data analysis, the data prediction part, data visualization part. So those things are much more exciting than what we have been doing till now. But to be able to really enjoy that and understand that, the basics of whatever we have done must be very clear to you, that what commands we are writing, why we are writing that. And that's where the doing the assignments is very important. So I'll also publish a new assignment today and try to complete both assignment 1 and assignment 2 by tomorrow. Okay. Any questions? All of you need to confirm at least in the chat if you don't want to come on the audio. Then I would know that whether to end the session today or to continue with some explanation or clarification. Great. So we'll end the session today. I will share the assignment and look forward to all of you working on that. And then we'll move with some more topics tomorrow. Thank you.